So for our next hour, we're going to be getting some reflections from within the Protestant community and also civic engagement and how, and we've heard some of all of these things along the way, but how do we connect with what's going on in the world and in our society? Um, so some things that I always repeat so that we know that people can come and go during our experience today. And I know that there's some folks who are watching on YouTube, and that's good. The meeting may fail at some point. Zoom could go offline. So just take a breath when that happens. And Bill with Sacred will reboot that. And we try to turn the chat room on in the last 15 minutes, something like that. So if you have thoughts or questions, you might want to start thinking about those when those are happening. So when the chat room comes on, you can enter those in. We have viewers on different platforms, so to keep that in mind. And also that once you're on here, you're in one sense no longer anonymous. So also keep that in mind too. I want to say thank you for the mayor coming up with this idea and convening it this morning, and he'll be back later as well. But I also want to thank the team of people, the team of San Antonians and volunteers who made today, coordinated it, planned it, pulled people together, and especially the San Antonio Community Resource Directory, sacred.org, which you can check out online. If you're not familiar with it, it's a directory of resources by congregations, nonprofits, government, city, other groups, but trying to get a collection of all of the services and resources that are available to people, and which is really critical right now. And so they're going through their entire directory, trying to make sure it is as up to date as possible with what is happening now in the pandemic. Needs volunteers to do that kind of work, and that's done at home, which is really convenient right now, right? So you can email info@sacred.org if you're interested and available to volunteer with them in any way. That would be just really great. I've been collecting, and I think we have all of our next group up here, so that's good. I've been collecting some of the words of wisdom along the way today. And so I'd like to repeat those. They seem to be very short one-liners. So from the mayor we heard this morning, we're all in this together. The sun also rises. We are all relatives. People together taking care of each other. This one was for people experiencing panic attacks, but I think it's good all the time. I love you. I'm here for you. Great question. What is the world we want to see? We may be just living it. Do your part and the pieces will come together. I think Omar said, tie your camel and trust the rest, right? It's about us. It's not about me or you. It's about us. So our next reflection group is going to be, again, some reflections from more of the Protestant tradition, but also about civic engagement, which is one of my favorite topics. It's that intersection between faith and civil society, and how do we work together. Vance is back with us again, and he's going to be co-hosting the lead from our Religious Discrimination and Diversity Action Team. So Vance, I hand it over to you to introduce our guest.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Anne. I've gotten to listen into most of conversations today, which has been really nice, and it's been incredible to hear all the great wisdom around compassion and love and care and kindness and faith and that everybody was willing to offer. I'm just really thankful for that. I'm excited about this next hour of conversation and want to welcome to our time together Pastor Candace Brock. She is with the Message Church, and so thankful that she can be with us. We also have with us Pastor Les Hollon, who is the pastor at Trinity Baptist Church and a part of the Interfaith San Antonio Alliance. And so thankful for Les's presence here. I'm not sure if we were able to bring on Tommy Calvert yet or not. Has anybody seen him?
He's there. I see him.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
I don't see Les yet. I see that he's there, but I don't see his face.
Oh, you can't see me. I can see you. Can you hear me?
There's Tommy Calvert.
Yes.
Can you hear me? I can see you all. I've got my video going.
Great. We can see you and we can hear you. We're glad that you're here, Mr. Calvert. He's a Bexar County Commissioner, and so we're thankful for your presence here today as well, for this day of reflection. And as Ann has said, we're going to talk a little bit about our reflections in general, about our experiencing this time as it has unfolded for us during this time of precaution and care and compassion around the virus that has come to our world, but also a little bit about the civic engagement and how we exist together civilly and in our society in ways that offer care for one another. As we know, sometimes that doesn't always work. So how do we give hope to that? So just want to say welcome, and I'd like to give you a chance to introduce yourselves a little more, if that's okay. And we'll start with Pastor Brock.
Hello, everyone. Hello, my name is Kim. I'm the lead. I serve as one of the pastors of the Message Church here in San Antonio, where I co-pastor with my husband, Reverend Dr. Frederick Gerard Brock. And in addition to pastoring, I'm also a social worker. So I have an opportunity to work on the front lines as far as a mental health clinician at our county jail.
Great, thank you. All right, Tommy Calvert.
Well, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I'm Bexar County Commissioner for Precinct 4. Very honored to serve the people of Precinct 4. Prior to becoming County Commissioner, I ran a global human rights organization that fought genocide and human trafficking, worked in war zones in places like Sudan and Burma, dealing with persecuted people. And I also have a radio station here in San Antonio Community Radio, KROV. And I've done public relations and public affairs work with Calvert International Consulting. So thank you. Very honored to be on this panel.
Great. Thank you. And Pastor Hollon.
Well, Vance and Tommy and Candace, great to be with you. And for 11 years, I've been privileged to be the senior pastor at Trinity Baptist Church. I'm involved in a whole host of kind of community engagements and connections, and so glad that we're having this conversation as faith leaders in our city today. So, Ann, thanks for your leadership with this, and Vance, thanks for hosting this.
Sure, certainly. Thank you all for being with us. You know, we've had the opportunity to hear from a variety of communities today, and they had me up bright and early to talk about some Indigenous wisdom. And for those of you who don't know, I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, which takes us into a whole different type of conversation about civic engagement. We won't go there today. But wanted to just say thanks for all those who, again, to all those who've had those conversations. And we've kind of started out with a question for each group that's gathered that I think is pretty poignant. And so I want to ask the three of you the same question, and we'll go in the same order if that's okay. And so that question really I'll ask the question and it can unfold how you wish. And I might ask some more follow-up questions, but really for you, as you have been invited to be a part of this time of sharing, what is this day of why is this day of reflection important? Why might it be important for you, and why might it be important for other folks to engage in such a day?
Yeah, so I definitely was honored when Reverend Wendy had reached out and said, hey, this is what the city is wanting to do, what the mayor is wanting to do. Would you be a part of this conversation? And my heart almost leaped out of my chest, because I think oftentimes we feel as though we're by ourselves. You know, we're living life, we're doing life on our own. And then when something of this magnitude causes us to truly come to a halt, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm by myself. But having this day of reflection really reminds all of us as a community, regardless of race, creed, color, denomination, beliefs, that we're all in this together and we're not by ourselves as we try and navigate what's going on at this time. So I was definitely elated because it's a much needed conversation.
Great. Let me ask you this, Pastor, how have you seen anyone in your congregation or in your family, how might they have been engaging in reflection already? Has that happened in your community in any ways?
You know, it has. We, at the Message Church, we actually meet weekly we have an executive leadership team. And every time we start off our meetings, we do Zoom meetings with our team, and we ask them, you know, we just check in, how are you doing? And they have begun to reflect and share how, you know, you really don't miss something until it's gone. And so that sense of community, being able to be in the same space and place and to hug and, you know, touch each other has really caused them to, you know, be reminded of, wow, we cannot take those things for granted. So really just pensive state of mind and really appreciating those things more so that we may have one time taken for granted.
Sure. That's great. Thank you. And Tommy, what about you? Why do you think this day might be, or this day of reflection might be important for folks? And to you.
Yeah, so I don't know can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So in my own personal life, in my own personal walk, I've had times where my life has moved so fast, being a relatively young person with a lot of success, immersing myself into work and community and I think life mission, that sometimes you know, I have felt to take stock. I see lessons every day in everything that the good Lord is putting before us, but sometimes I think you need time to really reflect to do the most growth. And in my meditation, spiritually, I feel as if we are at a point worldwide of reflection about what is important. A lot of things have been taken away from us, even the ability to go to church in some ways, in large gatherings. We don't have concerts, we don't have sports, we don't have the mega church. It's not safe to go in. And in my meditation, it kind of made me think about how the virus is almost, in a way, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but it's like hunting us. It's like when you're in persecution, and how you know how difficult it is just to survive under those kinds of circumstances. And so you know, family is so important right now, and checking in on one another and serving one another and helping one another. And if we've gotten away from those things because of the distraction of sports and entertainment and all the other things that were glittering gold, we're now getting refiled. We're getting filed down back to, I think, some of the basics. And I think we will be very changed as a society, and hopefully more grateful for the blessings that we have.
Sure. Well, Commissioner, I'm just curious also, have you seen in the work that you're doing, I'm guessing is online now with other commissioners and county staff and servants there, other leaders, has there been a shift in how folks are engaging with one another in regard to being reflective and engaging with one another with different types of care?
Well, you know, we definitely have a lot more people to care for. I have text messages of people who are getting to eviction and foreclosure and losing their job. And so I was busy before, but when the world is falling apart, people like myself who are servants of the public, we become very busy, knowing my limitation of holding the world together, but trying to, in spite of the impossibility of it. I also remember as the crisis hit, I was conducting commissioner's court, and we were talking about some projects that were being asked for money. And I remember telling my court, I said, there's nothing like a crisis to get your priorities straight on budget. And I think there will be more priority in terms of things like public health, you know, I worry about our children, right, in schools and the educational lag, because in my world, they design prisons based upon the third grade failure rate. And so if these young people who are not really in school don't have the attention and love and care that they need, it's going to wind up into a school to prison pipeline. And so, yeah, there's a focusing of what is important and where our limited resources are, because now even your county government may not have money. We're not asking people to give their taxes, right? We're saying, you know, don't worry about filing taxes. Don't worry about submitting your appraisals right now. All those kinds of things. We're somewhat dependent potentially on federal leadership because they can print money. We can't. We have to have balanced budgets. And so we have to be very resourceful with the resources that we do have. And so that changes, I think, the dynamic of how we have operated in the past.
Okay, thank you. And you, Pastor Hollon, how and why might this day of reflection be important to you or to others who are in your congregation?
Well, Candace and Tommy got us started well. I'll simply add to that. I think we all have an awareness that we won't be the same people on the other side of the pandemic as we were when we entered it. Therefore, how we live our faith and how we work and engage during the crisis will determine who we will be on the other side of the crisis. So the intentionality of this surreal time is really essential, because character formation, faith formation, community formation is all taking place. And as faith leaders, as we can help people to do the right physical distancing. And I think, Ann, you were one of the people that highlighted for us to use the word physical distancing and not just social distancing is really important. So another change that's taking place is we're accelerating a culture and a society that's using social media platforms, online, what we're doing today. So on the other side of this crisis, then we will find ourselves connecting in additional ways. And it reminds me of the Chinese character for the word crisis equals danger and opportunity. There's no guarantee we'll be better off on the other side of the crisis unless we choose to be a better people. And that's certainly where faith comes through, particularly in the Protestant tradition for which this hour is for, is out of a personal relationship with God, a relationship through Christ, so that we can be Christ-centered, we can be aware but not scared. We can be reaching out to our community. And while we are also being sensitive to the financial hurts and pains that people are going through, utilizing what are the resources that we have at Trinity Baptist Church or all of our churches, what are ways that we can help get resources to people that can be helpful to them. And so as a church, we've opened up all these kind of platforms, and we're stumbling along the way, but we're moving in the right direction. And I see that happening across the city, and I'm glad for the collective effort.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good.
And I would also, Vance, in my own life, for us to be personal and transparent, I find myself getting anxious when I haven't gotten myself to the next level. So I haven't prayed through, haven't thought through, haven't written out what's my next leadership thing to do. None of us know all of the moving parts that comprise this. That old phrase is really true, only God knows. And as we lean more and more into the infinite wisdom and presence of the Lord, but my own anxiety informs me that when I'm feeling it, there's more clarity that's hungering inside me. And as a leader, I'm responsible to get there. And that may just be more clarity for the next week, but to act on that.
Sure. Well, thank you for following up with that, Pastor, because I was going to ask that question next too, of you. So thank you for sharing that. Earlier this morning when I was talking with another colleague of ours in the city about, our individual practices around wisdom and action, one of the things that, especially wisdom action, that might keep us grounded or focused or centered during a time like this. I mentioned how, the literal thing that I maybe move toward is prayer. I am an Indigenous theologian, and yet I'm also a Lutheran. And so I find myself, moving between both those traditions in different ways. But the first thing I move to is prayer, and I use, say, medicine and smudging, which is the lighting of different medicines, whether it be cedar or sage or tobacco during prayer. And then, of course, I work in a national organization where I'm engaging with communities all across the country that are Native mostly. And we know that pipe carriers in the Indian community are folks who are ordained in a certain way to carry the medicine and the prayers of the pipe and the people in a certain way. So they're, moving into different scheduled times to do that at certain times during the day. So I'm just curious, as I think about that, and then I think about how I've moved into Lent, the season of Lent, and Lutheranism and other Protestant traditions is pretty important to us. And so on Wednesday nights now, we are practicing, and so I'm online at congregations in North Dakota, and I'm worshiping with congregations in North Dakota, and I'm worshiping with congregations in Seattle and Minnesota and California. And so I'm curious to know, for you individually, maybe first, what are some ways or some wisdom or actions that help keep you as both civic and faith leaders grounded and focused?
Yeah, so I know for me, as I shared, I'm a social worker, licensed master social worker. And so one of the things that we've been pushing a lot at work and then even within our congregation is self-care. We see oftentimes throughout the Bible, Jesus, I believe, was a proponent of self-care away and pray and different things like that. So for me, I've really had to ramp up my self-care. I see it there. I haven't been able to see him lately, but my goal is to definitely hopefully telehealth so then I can continue those sessions. I've increased my journaling. I found that being able to get it out on paper is very therapeutic for me. And then also increasing my outdoor activity, just going for walks, being able to run, and just I feel more connected with Christ when I'm outside and in nature, because it gives me that opportunity to be reminded that while, yes, we are in just the midst of this pandemic, I still I need to exercise an attitude of gratitude and being able to appreciate what is still consistent in life. So those have been some of the practices that I've used personally, and even as a family, we're trying to incorporate more of those, and just being intentional about disconnecting from social media. It's very easy to get inundated, and so we're just trying to set those boundaries and saying, hey, from this time, let's disconnect, and then just be mindful of ourselves and what we're doing. So those are some ways that I've been intentional during this time.
Great, thank you. I've really appreciated my walks and my little jogs over this time, and just being out to breathe the air, if not the pollen, but necessarily being outside is also a very good thing. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Well, staying grounded is fairly simple in some ways, because all you have to do is go and see the shelves with no toilet paper, and you're like, this is where we are at. I mean, we're in a difficult situation, and it's a reminder, it's a symbolic reminder, those empty shelves, of the fact that you're not immortal, that there is something out there. But on a hopeful standpoint, I have prayer warriors and friends. We get together 2 or 3. It's been 3 of us over the last couple of weeks. But that ritual that I've had of I actually, even though I'm Baptist, I have a Catholic adoration chapel that I utilize, and like you, I take a little bit from many spiritual faith traditions and utilize the power, I think, of them. But those are the kinds of of things that keep us grounded. I mean, everything from having to put on gloves when you're shopping and all of those kinds of things. You know, at the moment, it's difficult to get away from this suspended sense of normalcy. It's been suspended, and like Pastor was saying, I don't think we'll be the same at the end of this. Hopefully better. Hopefully better. That's the goal. I think we will be. I think we will be better. I think things will come into focus about what we need to be as a society. I do think we've gotten a long way away from the compassion and caring and humanity and what it is to be human. And so in this time where things are edgy, you know, even in politics, sometimes we have samurai swords that we draw. Being a little bit more considerate to my colleagues than because everybody's going through some things, and maybe letting some things go for, you know, just letting them go because it's just everybody's in a state of survival. So all these things are reminders of where we are on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Yeah, it is.
Along with what I shared earlier, Vance, want to make a couple additional comments, if I may. Reminded of that theologian Charles Schulz in his comic strip Peanuts. He had a lead character called, of course, Charlie Brown, Lucy, and Lucy had her psychiatric shingle out. You know, gives advice for maybe 5 cents. So Charlie went up to her and was wanting advice, and she said, "Hey, Charlie, I love all humanity. It's only individuals like you I can't stand." So it's a combination of the general and the specific, you know, the local and the global. Mm-hmm. And this is a time that we're feeling that 7.8 billion people are all thinking about the same thing sometime during the day, which in itself is incredible. And like that Chinese character of danger and opportunity, as faith leaders around the globe, but locally, we're wanting to all step into that. Thus, this day's conversation is important. So for me personally, that's also true. I'm staying connected with, you know, my global friends and who are in all the continents are on the front line, you know, doing their work, praying with them, sharing notes, looking at best practices. Early in February, I just returned from Ndola, Zambia, where I spoke for the All African Baptist Fellowship, and just taking that kind of experience from 18 different African nations, having been with them and coming back here, kind of dwells inside me, and I prayerfully reflect on that. And then my wife and I and son and future daughter-in-law are taking walks on a regular basis in our neighborhood, and just connecting there. And then, of course, in the life of Trinity Baptist Church and our community, the specific relationships, the specific actions that we can take. And then the use of allowing Scripture. The key to understanding Scripture is see it in context. And we all have the context of COVID-19 by which we can look at any passage of the 1,189 chapters. And Psalm 23 is so loved because it speaks to all of our faith stages and life ages. Walking through the valley of the shadow of death, I've been praying that, reflecting on it, sharing that with our congregation, that we will fear no evil, not because of our own power, but because the power of the Lord who is our shepherd. And even he will prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemies, and seeing COVID-19 as an enemy. But he anoints our head with oil, which is healing power and a sense of purpose. Our cup overflows, which represents joy and suffering. So personalizing Scripture within the context of our time is also, I find, calming and centering for me.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's I've been online with some other organizations doing something similar as we're doing here, maybe on a much smaller scale. One of which is with the All Nations Indian Church, which is a United Church of Christ congregation that my adopted mother is pastor of in Minneapolis. And so while I study theology and oftentimes in the Word, I've been forced by my adopted mother. She's been bossing me around. She's this elder Indian woman who's just been said, "Okay, find a scripture for this Wednesday's meeting or for this Sunday." And so sometimes we just need to be reminded that that's a good place to be, and because it's been a good journey for me to do that. So thank you for that reminder. I want to read from you. You don't know this about me, but or maybe you do, but I I'm the Director of Communications for a national Native American nonprofit, the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. And so I've been a Director of Communications for a few years now. And since that time, I've kind of let my own social media go, and compared to how active I used to be, because I'm constantly looking at my work social media. But I did have a chance to, I do of course now have a chance to look more at my own, and I've not been so much posting a lot, but reading a lot of what other folks are posting. And there was a graphic that came across my screen from an elder who's Ho-Chunk, who lives in Minneapolis, who's also part of the congregation. And I just want to read what was on the graphic, if that's okay.
Please.
And just get your thoughts on it. So I'll read real quick. It's about three short paragraphs. When you go out and see the empty streets, the empty stadiums, the empty train platforms, don't say to yourself, it looks like the end of the world. What you're seeing is love in action. What you're seeing in that negative space is how much we do care for each other, for our grandparents, for our immunocompromised brothers and sisters, for people we will never even meet. People will lose their jobs over this. Some will lose their businesses, and some will lose their lives. All the more reason to take a moment when you're on your walk or on your way to the store or just watching the news to look into the emptiness and marvel at all of that love. Let it fill you and sustain you. It isn't the end of the world. It is the most remarkable act of global solidarity we may ever witness.
Powerful.
Yeah, so and it is, right? Because I reposted it on my Facebook and got lots of hits on it, got lots of likes, lots of comments, and lots of shares. And so I felt like I was going viral for a little bit. And so
let me say one thing. I mean, I think that I agree. It is beautiful. It is awesome. A thought. At the same time, you know, my name means warrior. Tommy, the name means warrior, and I think about what are we to do about those not showing that love, right? You know, there is an effort to balance good and evil, and it's not to say that it's evil per se, because there's some just don't know the error of their ways. But that was the contrarian thought that I had as well, about how do we analyze that?
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Brock.
And I saw a similar graphic online, and it really kind of had that. I had to reflect, and I said, "Wow, it is amazing to see that people are abiding to the orders that are being put out." But then, as our commissioner said, you know, on the flip side of it, it is very frustrating when you see this lackadaisical attitude that goes forward. And it's like, I was actually listening to a Bible study yesterday, and someone had made the comment, you know, you staying in your home of faith. And I'm so grateful that the person who was conducting the Bible study shot back and said, it's not a lack of faith, but it's common sense. And so I appreciate that person correcting that individual that said that. But at the same time, I agree, staying in your house, being mindful of those that are compromised is such a beautiful, beautiful act, that this is bigger than me. It's bigger than my wants and desires, but I want my neighbor. You know, the Lord says, love your neighbor as you love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that is what we need to be doing right now. Those individuals who are really pushing the envelope and not adhering to what's being said or done. And to me, it really speaks to how they feel about themselves and how they think about the community as a whole. So, yeah.
Vance, can I add something?
Absolutely.
And Tommy made me think of it, when your name meaning warrior, and bringing up kind of that other vantage point, kind of the other side of that coin. Because this last week I was like, we are living in the largest systemic act of compassion that history has ever seen, or we may ever see, right? People working together and coming together. And so I really appreciate the quote. But but there is this, and we could just talk in that realm, which would be great, but there's also that on the groundness. And I saw a video reflection in the last week or so where the speaker was looking at this situation that we're in kind of from, and I'm not normally one to go this direction, but from a war vantage point. And then looked at the Army, Navy, and Air Force as a metaphor, but I found it very powerful. And the strength of that came with that. So she looked at the Army as the ground force that's happening, and then translated that in terms of the doctors and healthcare workers, people who are collecting the garbage, the people who are at the grocery stores, the people and working, like that ground force that's at work during this time, and how extraordinary that is, and how needed and necessary it is. And then looking at the Navy, at its work of, staying afloat, but also but going also below the surface. So the need for the analyst, the shifts in policies and procedures, the scientists who are working at vaccine, and all of how, going below the surface and trying to figure out how do we continue to move forward, but we need that kind of deeper look at it. And then the Air Force being above, but the importance of the work that is just as important as on the ground, staying afloat, going deep, that the Air Force, the spiritual healing, the connectivity through humanity, how that, it's almost like an equation of those three things and how they're all necessary in moving forward. I don't know. I was just thinking of that when Tommy mentioned the warrior thing. We can, and I do, I think I live my life by looking at the wonder of humans working together and saying, look at that. Look at that piece of compassion and how that's working, but also staying on the ground and knowing the reality and the kind of the components that need to be together to make it move forward. I've said enough, but.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Anna.
so that imagery enables us just to see the larger picture. And it's what Tommy said and what Vance you read. Those aren't opposed to each other. They just help to complete the full picture. And if we use the imagery of the Navy and the Army and the Air Force, again, it's a complementary relationship, bringing together the best resources to deal with the worst side of ourselves as a globe, as well as to get to the best side of ourselves. And as faith leaders, we really are on the front line around the world, and certainly in San Antonio, to help people be at the best version of themselves. And that's where in this time of anxiety, faith leaders, we take deep breath within the Spirit of God, and then we help others to do that. So when people begin to act as anxious opponents around scarcity, then we can help them to see the opportunity of really stretching ourselves, that we only get to a better place personally when we realize it's not just about me. It includes me, but life is not just about me. And so as faith leaders, there's so many of these powerful truths that we seek to live and we know that are true, about loving our neighbors. We love ourselves as we fully love God. We're about to be at Maundy Thursday, which is, Jesus said, I want you to be really clear about this commandment, to love each other. Now, how do I know how to do that? He says, by how I loved you. You get it? How I loved you. When you were at your very worst, I loved you. And by this, all people in the whole world, as well as across the street, will know you're my disciples by how you love with each other. So the specificity of love creates credibility of love.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And you know, and that's one of the things that um, in this quote that I talked about is that, you know, the emptiness and the marvel at all of that love. I guess the emptiness and marvel at all of that love, it just really hit me, because really that's what we're talking about. And you know, we as Protestants, as Christians, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, God, Christ being love, and how do we share that with other folks. And so I guess with that being said, I'm curious also to hear from each of you what might be, as you do your work, whether that be in the church or as a social worker or in our civic portion of our society. What is your hopeful vision? What is your hopeful vision for those that you serve and lead? What is a message that you could give to those folks or to us?
Yeah, so I definitely think for me, the vision that I hope people would walk away is just truly think beyond yourself. That has kind of been this overarching theme that's been playing over and over in my head, that we think beyond ourselves. At our church, we always relevant and relational. And the reason why we say that is because we want people to know that, of course, we're real people issues, but our God that we serve is real. And so we want to bring this level of transparency with one another, and able to know during this time that we're all affected. I think Dr. Hollon said a little earlier that this is on everybody's mind, every human being in our world. And so giving each other the space to process what's going on, not um, not making people feel guilty for how they're feeling, but really giving each other that space. Because I feel at times we don't allow that. You know, social media, we put on our best self. We want to portray this image, right? But right now, I mean, truth be told, if we were to be honest with ourselves, this image is getting harder and harder to keep up with, just because of everything that's going around. So my hope and my vision would be that we would allow each other to be ourselves and really just have these conversations to process it. Because as the social worker side of me is thinking, okay, when we come out of the impact of mental health, and I have, you know, 1 in 4 people suffer from a mental health crisis and or an illness. So now we can prepare ourselves within our different faith communities to see there may be even more. And even as faith leaders ourselves and civic leaders may have a mental health crisis, how do we go forward in handling that and just being compassionate and offering that space to process life and move forward? So that would be my vision and hope for everything.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, so you know, I feel as if we're in a Garden of Gethsemane moment in some ways. We are at a point of agony in some ways. People are agonizing over the restrictions and the disease and how life will be and their jobs and just so many. It's important for me to say that, well, you know, that we will get through this fire. We will get through the fire, and God will be with us. He has always been with us from the beginning of time. And I think that the thing that we have to take from this fire and this agony is a refocus. I think as society, we have gotten way far away from the love that we're supposed to be demonstrating to each other. We've gotten way in too much into borders, to be honest with you, into boundaries and borders. And you know, there is no limit to God's love. And so I think that I pray that people will value their freedom. I remember how my own life changed when I freed slaves in the Sudan. My perspective on what was important. You know, I camped out in a tent and guarded by a rebel army in the 120-degree heat, and it didn't matter. So in the future, when I came back to America, if something got dirty, it's not the most important thing. We can take it to the cleaners. We can clean it in the washer. We can get a new whatever pair of pants, right? So I recalibrate how we love one another, and the power of choice in people's lives. I think that people have taken their civic agency for granted. And as a result of that, it's one of those forgive them, Father, they know not what they do moments, where because people pay more attention to whose football stats matter than some of the things that are in elected or even spiritual leadership, I think we have ventured. And so I hope that we will come back of the power in each one of us to dictate our path through civic choice and utilize that in a much better way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Along with that, I think of one of the most powerful voices in our community is Coach Popovich. And almost after every Spurs game, he would say, it's only a game, keep it in perspective. And I don't think God caused the crisis of COVID-19, but the Lord is a God of healing and resurrection. And so he can use this damaging crisis to take us to a better place as a people if we're willing to learn from it. And are doing kind of celebrity worship as a culture, are doing materialism worship as a culture. All of that stuff is just addictive and it's damaging, and eventually it destroys the soul. And as a nation and as a world, I mean, this is something we've got to repent from. And each of us look individually, and for us is together. I'm not trying to get to be a Baptist preacher and just start preaching, but that's part of the awareness. And then we remember that as we shared, we're about to go into Passion Week, the Palm Sunday to Easter time. And what the word passion means is to suffer alongside with. It doesn't, it's not the passion of, go whoever your team is. It's to suffer with people, love with people. And even in the midst of the most tense moment, Tommy, you mentioned about the Garden of the Gethsemane. I think it's a good image. And Candace, you mentioned about how to share Christ. Jesus took care of Judas, the guy who betrayed him. In the most tense time in his life, he was still trying to give him an out. He was still trying, to say, you don't have to do this. And that's trying to create the conversion of opportunity for destructive character in our world. So we are trying to, our call as faith leaders is to try to transform the part of our practice as a people that just wasn't sustainable. It's not healthy. It's not true to Scripture. It's not true to God. And that we can come out of this. In faith leaders, we're going to be responsible to not let our people forget this, just trying to go back where they were in their daily practices, but to keep this going forward. And another advantage, Vance, your question was, how can we be better on the other side of this? I think our getting to know each other even better, creating all these opportunities to connect with each other and collectively having strengthened our knowing.
Yeah, thank you for that.
We do have a comment and a question from the chat from two different people. So first, the comment. The Garden of Gethsemane first evokes the sacrifice of impending crucifixion, but it also evokes the hope of resurrection. My experience has been that growth happens more readily in the valley than it does on the mountaintop. That we emerge a more loving, gracious people is my earnest prayer.
So be it.
So that's more than comment, that's a prayer.
Amen, amen.
And then the question from someone else, the instinct for self-preservation leads to the prisoner's dilemma. We should be cooperating because the outcomes are better for everyone, but instead people's instinct to self-preservation leads to each of us suffering more alone.
Oh.
How can we get people to break out of the me first mindset?
Well, can I just respond to that, because I have to deal with it a lot, because I like a pastor, I have to deal with all people. And so, we have to teach, and we have to, sometimes people just can't see. And so we have to first try to empower and meet people where they're at and walk them through that. And then sometimes when that doesn't work, you just have to, you have to let life happen, let the lesson happen. And so some people are not going to learn until they're brought to their knees. People talk about, the economy and keeping it open, but if you don't have a workforce that's healthy to work, you don't have an economy, right? And so that's what some people cannot see, is that the driven nature of our economy is in our people. And if our people are sick or dead or what have you, and unable to consume, buy things, right? Then it won't function. And so what is important is to take care of people first. You don't do that, you don't get the rest.
I think if I could add to that, I do believe that it comes with a level of maturity. A level of maturity comes with that, to be able to say that, it's not always about me. Sorry, my 3-year-old. I have to do this for school, so she hops on my chats with me for school. But to go back to that, I think it does lead to a level of maturity that we all have to have, to say, you know what, while I know I need to take care of me, there are others that need even more. So what I need to do my part. So that's what I would add to what our commissioner has shared.
Pastor Hollon.
Again, we change our practice when we can get specific. So for someone who is me first and not trying to balance that out with others, it's saying, here are 3 people I want you to check on. Would you call these people? Would you text these people? Would you see how they're doing? And then it's they get into their life situation, and then we think, well, golly, I'm not the only one who's in a tough spot here. I don't know if my job's going to last, if I'm going to be able to pay the bills. Am I going to get a break that I need to be able to get from this package from Washington, D.C., all that stuff. And then be able to say, okay, we take then that's one relationship or those 3 relationships. And then as faith leaders, we help them to say, thank you for work you did there. And, there are other people that also need what you have to offer. There was a friend of mine who taught me that when he prays, when he's under most stress and he prays, he raises his arms. And that great tradition. He said, not because I'm feeling praise at the moment, but just by raising my arms, I know that I'm stretching myself into the bigness of God, that it helps me to keep myself in perspective. And then the arms of Christ on the cross are around other people. So as much as we can get people to check in with 3 or 5 or 10 others to say how you're doing. And in Life at Trinity, all of our deacons are calling throughout our church membership, and saying, how's it going? How can we be supportive? Then we're calling out with some others within the larger community. And our prayer room is very active during this time. And as people enter to our prayer room 24/7, it's just, they are entering into this larger world of individual needs, but taking that into the grace of God's bigness. So again, it's the general and the specific, it's the local and the global.
Thank you. So, we are coming toward the end of our time, and I do have one other question for you folks. And we may already guess the answer, but I want to hear from your wisdom and your words. What will we make it through this? And if so, how do you know?
Well, yes, I think we will. Is there a guarantee? No, there's not. I mean, people can go stupid and crazy and do all kinds of warlike activities. We can get our government leaders angry and try to get war stuff, economic war, and all of that could play itself out. The plague could actually get worse. But what we're experiencing is not new to world history. There have been pandemics before. How we're specifically experiencing it because of where we are as a society is different. But we've had epidemics and pandemics and plagues through the course of world history, and we've gone forward as a civilization. We certainly see it in the biblical story. But as our financial analysts would say, past performance doesn't guarantee the future performance. So that's where the Lord is, I think, is saying to us, this is a dynamic opportunity. Trust me, we can get to the other side. There will be life on the other side. Make sure that it's better. But we've got to hold on to the rod and staff as we walk through the valley of the shadow to get through the valley. And if we don't do that, then we could be worse off than we were before we entered it. But I'm a person of hope. I'm a person of Easter resurrection. I believe we will get through it, and we can be a better people.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I have to concur with everything that Pastor Hollon has shared, and we will get through this. And it's just really just holding on to our faith and trusting that this is so much bigger. The word reminds us that God's ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. And so we just have to find peace in knowing that it's bigger than us. And, we're going to do our part to make it through. Gosh, Pastor Hollon said it best. I don't want to add any more to it. That was spot on.
Sister Candace, I amen what you said.
Thank you.
You guys are hitting it just right. Let me just say, the answer that came into my head first was, it's yes and no. And no came in first, but I'm going to be hopeful. And what I mean by yes and no is that the collective we, in some ways, is going to die and be reborn. Who we are as a society, as we are seeing already, is going to change. And that's okay to have a death and a resurrection. And, the reason I know it is because, God has been with us from all time. And because of that, we know that he will continue to be with us. So will we get through this? Yes and no. Yes and no. We will get through this with, I think, a new collective we and maybe a new collective me. I think that's the best part of what can happen and what will happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner. You sound kind of Lutheran, if I might say so.
I went to McCarthy Park Lutheran from kindergarten through third grade. I've had it.
No, that's where it comes from, then.
I got a Methodist stepfather. I got a Pentecostal grandmother, a Baptist mom and dad. I mean, I'm Episcopalian schools. I'm part Jewish. Baruch atah. I got it all, brother. I'm ready.
All right, bring it on. Bring it on.
Thank you. Well, there's so many more things we could say, and I don't want to get us too deep, but we only have about 3 minutes left. But I want to just kind of ask this one short, quick question, if you might, and then maybe Ann or myself will close us. But for whom, I guess this is a question I'll ask, and it's a one that my mother asked me. What would you tell young people? What would you what would you tell young people right now who are a student, a youth in your youth group? What do you say to them in a time like this?
God is with you. Specifically right now where you are, God is with you. Mm-hmm. And God wants to work through you to help others get through this pandemic. And we will get through this by our working together. And one day you'll be able to tell stories of what your life was like during COVID-19 to help shape a better world.
Thank you.
I would tell a young person, which I tell my nieces and nephew this, be kind, offer compassion, because this too shall pass. It's not our forever. That's what I would offer to them.
I would say a child will lead them. The spirit and goodness of young people, the innocence, the idealism, the goodness, that's what's going to lead us. And so we look to the future to see where we're going, and they can lead us into a much better future. And I know that they will.
Thank you. Well, thank you all, three of you, also very much for your time today, for your sharing of your wisdom and being a part of this day of reflection. I know that I am a better person for having heard you speak truth, and I'm sure that many others are here today as well. I will leave us with what I kind of left us with last time when I closed earlier this morning. In Cherokee, we use the word gadugi. Gadugi means working together. And I think that in our faith traditions and in our civic responsibilities and engagement, that can serve as a model for all of us, that we don't survive and we don't move forward if we don't have the spirit of Gadugi about us. And so thank you, all three of you, for witnessing that Gadugi today in your words and your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
Blessings.
you. Bless you.
Blessings.
What a great day.